Martin, why are you here? Talk about what Bobby Kennedy meant to you, what his legacy means to you, and what this tournament does.
Well, he changed our lives. He changed the direction of the future that we had felt was taken from us with the death of President Kennedy and then Martin Luther King. And Bobby was, for us, the last great hope of our generation. And when that was taken, then we felt empty and lost. And I think anyone, my age and your age as well, will remember that that crushing event 40 years ago in June. And we somehow never thought we would recover. Of course, you do recover in a lot of ways, but there's still so many unhealed wounds. And I will say that, quite honestly, it's not since that time that we've had someone that fulfilled our hopes and young people's hopes. And we have it now in Barack Obama. So.
We know at the beginning of this campaign, we were talking to Tom Brokaw, who wrote a great book called Boom.
Yeah.
He talked about 1968, well, the entire baby boom. We talked about 68 in particular. But more generally, though, he was struck by the fact, and I was struck by the fact, that here we are 40 years later with a guy that really has inspired a lot of Americans, more than anybody since Bob.
This is what it was like for us as a younger generation looking for the future, and then it was very, very dark for us. And I think and there's a lot more young people and a lot more people in the world now. I mean, you saw the reaction in Europe and the Mideast. I mean, they're yearning for some direction, some light, some humanity.
Yeah. For people that don't really study the life of Bobby Kennedy, they don't understand why. I got interested in politics. A conservative Republican got interested in politics after reading Arthur Schlesinger's book on the life of Bobby Kennedy, because here you have one guy that can make such a difference in the lives of people. And of course, the story that really moved me was the night Martin Luther King was assassinated, and he chose to go into Indianapolis when the police wouldn't even follow him in there. And because he did that, no politicians do that. They didn't before, they haven't since, but since he did that, while the rest of America burned, Indianapolis went to sleep in peace. One person can make such a big difference, and he did that.
One heart with courage is a majority. That's what he was.
You talk about how Americans were facing much darkness in that time. Today, we're in a crisis that we haven't seen in decades. Yet, we were talking yesterday, we're in restaurants, we're in stores, people are still spending, people are still going out and having lavish dinners. It almost seems like in some sectors of society in this country, we don't get the situation we're in. Some people are tremendously worried, yet the spending and the credit card economy that we're living in, it seems like it hasn't gotten through perhaps the extent of the trouble that we face right now and the kind of leadership we might need.
Well, for most of us, the crisis in the economy starts on the I don't know what restaurants you're eating in.
Well, we were at a mall, and
the poor are not going to restaurants.
Absolutely, no. but the people who have gotten themselves into trouble and who are living off credit cards and still are seem to there almost seems to me to be a disconnect, at least on certain levels, where we see that there's a problem, but we're still using the credit card. We're not changing our habits.
A little whistling in the dark, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah. But it's also it's an expression of confidence in the future.
Possibly.
So I don't think people want to feel despair at this time. I think they really have to feel a sense of confidence.
Barnacle and I are upset with you.
With me?
Yeah, we are.
No.
What I just said?
No. No, because Pat Buchanan is a friend of ours, and you used him as a punchline.
No. That was Aaron Sorkin. I'm going to plead.
The buck.
I'm going to plead Aaron Sorkin there.
By the way, Pat, as anybody that knows Pat knows that he laughed louder than anybody. Do we have the clip? Well, no, we won't play the clip.
Aaron adores him. He absolutely adores him. It was a tribute to him.
Yeah, he's got one of the best senses of humor you'd ever encounter in any human being, Pat Buchanan, and he's had that sense of humor since he was with Youth for Andrew Jackson.
Well, Pat told a story yesterday because there was Bernstein wrote something in the Huffington Post talking about how McCain was complimentary of G. Gordon Liddy. How does he attack heirs? And Buchanan goes, I remember, and he's got 1,000 of these stories. I remember they came to me, they said, hey, G. Gordon Liddy wants us to firebomb the Brookings Institute. What should we do, Pat? Yeah. Pat said he sat there for a second, thought, and he goes, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it.
Aaron is very fond of him.
Yeah. There's some people, as you know, that there's such a disconnect from how they are on TV to how they are in real life. Pat's a wonderful guy. Yeah. Let's talk more about this campaign, though. Let's talk more about Barack Obama. What do you, again, as somebody who's been an activist your entire life, what inspires you the most about Obama? Why do you think when he gets into the White House, if he gets into the White House, he won't be like so many other politicians that once they get the power, we're only interested in holding on to it?
Well, from where he comes from, what he stands for, and what he aspires to. I mean, I'm excited about the people he's going to bring in with him. I mean, this is, the hope we had with Bobby and what we had in reality with John Kennedy was the people he brought into his administration. The best and the brightest, and I think we're going to get a share of that in this administration. That's our hope, and I can't see it being any different. Do you?
No, I don't. I agree with you on that. But let me ask you about your view of something that seems to have happened in our culture and in our politics over, I don't know, maybe the last 20 or 30 years. You live your public life on the left-hand side of the dial.
I do.
And, there's no mistake about it, and you're not shy about it. What has happened in America that has allowed the word liberal to become so besmirched?
Yeah.
What has happened?
I think people want to be on the side that's winning. And I'm never comfortable unless I'm uncomfortable, like right now.
It is cold.
I think that the bottom line for me is I'm not interested in politics. I'm interested in social justice. I'm interested in service. And I think that that's how we find ourselves, and that's how we free ourselves. I don't think that if you have something to offer, it has to include other people. It can't just be about yourself. And I think people see that. But it's our leadership that has been so lacking, particularly these last 8 years. There just hasn't been a real sense of caring. I heard Bill Clinton once get interviewed after he left the White House, and he was just asked, well, how do you feel it went down? And he said, I think the American people knew I was on their side. And we did. We had that sense that he was on our side, no matter what was going down. And, I think we lost that in this administration, and we're looking forward to somebody being on our side.
Well, also, would you agree with the premise that one of the great events in the recent history of this country, whether he wins or loses, is the fact that a black man is running for president of the United States and actually spoke to the country about race earlier this spring in a way that has not happened, perhaps since Robert Kennedy. Yeah. I am old enough to recall not only Indianapolis, where he spoke the evening that Martin Luther King was assassinated, but a motorcade that Robert Kennedy took through Gary, Indiana in the spring of 1968, then a bitterly divided city racially. Steel workers, iron workers, and poor African Americans coming together to view, to try and touch, to see and hear this one candidate for president. It was an amazing sight.
Extraordinary. We haven't seen that since then. So I think people see it in Barack Obama, and I think my generation has that same hopeful feeling, and I'm very happy for the younger generation. People who don't remember Bobby Kennedy, not old enough to remember, and didn't feel that great loss that we felt in our youth, are going to be rejuvenated, and I have great hope for the future, and particularly for the rest of the world. I mean, we're isolated, and here's this brilliant young man who goes to Europe, and he draws 200,000 strangers. His opponent goes to a German restaurant in Columbus, Ohio, and can't draw flies. And this brilliant young man comes home and he drops in the polls. There's something not right about this,
McCain's drawing the crowds now with Sarah Palin, though.
Oh, well.
Just saying.
I'll say nothing. I'll say nothing about Sarah.
Let's end on the high note.
The only thing I'll say about Miss Palin, there's less to her than meets the eye.
Oh.